Um, I wanted to ask, how much has the national debt increased under Trump's tenure so far?
Right now, debt as a percentage of GDP
Hey
is
everybody,
roughly where it was
welcome
when
back to the
President
channel.
Trump came
You
into
just
office
saw
as
that
it
little
pertains to
snippet,
fiscal year
and
20
you
right
Outsmarts
just
around.
tells you everything you need to know about what is completely broken inside Washington. What you're about to watch is the full 5-minute exchange between Representative Ilhan Omar and Russell Vought, the former acting budget director under President Donald Trump. I want you to pay attention to every second of it, because this right here is a masterclass in how the squad and the radical left actually operate. This is not a hearing, this is not oversight, and it's certainly not about understanding the federal budget. This is political theater from the moment Ilhan Omar opens her mouth. Her entire strategy is to build a verbal trap, to throw slimy, baiting questions designed to corner Russell Vought into a cheap gotcha moment. She's not looking for truth, she's hunting for a sound bite, something she can pass to her allies in the media so they can run a dramatic headline on national television. But the person sitting across from her is not some lightweight. Russell Vought is a seasoned professional, a patriot who knows every detail of the budget, and he is not falling for the traps she tries to set. She attempts to paint a fictional picture of the Trump economy, a narrative that simply does not reflect reality, but as you'll see, she fails in spectacular fashion. Before we roll the full clip, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Do you think these hearings are genuine attempts to discover truth, or are they nothing more than expensive, taxpayer-funded political theater? All right, let's get into the full exchange.
Thank you, German. Thank you for to my colleague for the shout out to the Progressive Caucus for putting out a budget. I wanted to ask, how much has the national debt increased under Trump's tenure so far?
Right now, debt as a percentage of GDP is roughly where it was when President Trump came into office as it pertains to fiscal year 20.
Can you
right
just
around
say
80%.
how much?
Right now, the national debt is $23 trillion. It's too high. That's why we have a budget here to be able to tackle it by $4.6 trillion in deficit reduction over 10 years.
All right. So it's increased $3 trillion. And your deficit in 2020 alone will be more than 60% higher than the year Trump took office. Massive tax cuts for the rich, aggressive military spending, and excessive immigration enforcement have all impartially contributed to these high deficits. And with revenue as share of the economy at historic lows and income inequality at historic highs, I fail to see how you can realistically balance the budget under your current policies. But you're still expecting that high income growth will help pay for these wasteful spending policies. When was the last time that the annual GDP has hit your projected growth rate of 3% or higher per year?
Yeah, in our first year, we were way over our economic growth number when the actuals came in at 2%, and we were significantly underneath that. So we have been out of the last 3 years, which has been closer to our mark than CBO's 2 out of the last 3 years. But I would say we are trying to actually reduce wasteful spending in this budget. We don't think of tax relief for American families as wasteful spending. We think it's their own hard-earned money that we're returning to them so they can invest in their families, their communities, and the individuals in their households.
Yeah, well, we differ in that. It was never during this presidency. Your growth projection is about double the CPO expected during that same time period. However, we know that this administration is not afraid. My colleagues on the other side and this administration will lecture us on the academic principles of fiscal responsibility and austerity by limiting deficit spending, unless it means cutting tax cuts.
It gets even worse when you watch the entire interaction from beginning to end. This is the perfect example of a politician who clearly despises the president and is only interested in picking a fight. From the moment she starts speaking, the entire performance is rehearsed. She even gives a shout-out to the Progressive Caucus, essentially applauding the socialist wing of Congress for their fantasy budget that has no connection to economic reality. Then she launches her first big attack, asking how much the national debt has increased, and watch how Russell Vought responds like a real expert. He immediately begins explaining the debt the way economists actually analyze it, by comparing it to GDP, because what truly matters is the nation's ability to pay it back, not just a raw number. But does Ilhan Omar let him explain? Of course not. She cuts him off instantly, demanding he give the big, scary $23 trillion figure because she wants something dramatic to pass to her friends in the media. She is not interested in nuance or serious discussion. She wants shock value and headlines. And even though Vought can see the game she's playing, he stays calm and gives her the number. Then, right on cue, she dives into her prepared speech, the exact speech she was going to read no matter what his answer was. She blames the deficit on 3 things: massive tax cuts for the rich, aggressive military spending, and excessive immigration enforcement. But here's the truth. She is attacking the 2017 tax cuts that allowed ordinary Americans to keep more of their own money, cuts that helped drive historically low unemployment. She criticizes rebuilding the U.S. military after years of weakness, calling it aggressive, while millions of Americans call it national security. And she attacks enforcing immigration laws as though protecting the border is somehow wrong. In other words, she listed 3 major accomplishments of the Trump administration and tried to portray them as disasters. That is how radically out of touch her worldview is. She opposes a strong economy, a strong military, and a secure border, everything most Americans value. Then she tries another trap, questioning the 3% GDP projection with her usual smug confidence. But Russell Vought hits back with facts, reminding her that their projections were actually more accurate than those of the Congressional Budget Office, an agency known for underestimating Republican policies and overestimating Democrat proposals. And then he lands the knockout line: tax relief for American families is not wasteful spending, because it's their own hard-earned money. That's the MIC drop moment. She has no comeback, because in her socialist worldview the government owns everything first and citizens only get what the government decides to hand back. In contrast, patriots like Russell Vought believe the money belongs to the people, and Washington should stop wasting it. But she doesn't stop. She keeps desperately reaching for anything that might stick, trying to scare seniors about Social Security and Medicare, using the same tired tactic Democrats reach for whenever they're out of arguments. She pretends to lecture him on fiscal responsibility, which is almost unbelievable coming from Ilhan Omar, one of the loudest voices behind trillion-dollar fantasy plans like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. Her own proposals would cost around $90 trillion, and she's lecturing someone else about deficits. Her outrage isn't about overspending. Her outrage is that money was spent on border security and national defense instead of her radical wish list. She wanted free college, massive socialist programs, and policies that would explode the national debt to levels never seen in history. She ends with a dramatic, perfectly rehearsed speech crafted solely for the cameras, talking about cuts and cruelty. It's all part of the act. The entire event was scripted to create emotional footage, not to uncover truth. She never cared about a single answer he gave. And the real hypocrisy is overwhelming. Ilhan Omar, of all people, pretending to be some guardian of ethics and integrity is astonishing. She has plenty of unanswered questions about her own past, her own finances, and her own conduct, yet she sits there lecturing a decent public servant like Russell Vought. Through all of it, Vought remains calm, professional, and factual, exposing her agenda simply by refusing to play along. This wasn't a hearing. It was a failed political hit job, and she failed miserably. That's all for this one. Let me know who you think came out